Thank you for inviting me. I wish I could have been there. It's a great program. I so enjoyed your talk, Gabor. Really nice. Happy to see your work. So we'll try and see if we can do it remotely, and hope that everything works well. So I'm going to try and share my screen and show you some of my projects. See if this works. So my name is VIJGEN. I'm a data artist in the Netherlands. This image presents a central concept in my work, which is the infosphere, or the idea that we literally live in information. What I like about this concept is that it's a sort of reference to the idea of the atmosphere that sustains life on, and translates it to, say, a 21st century concept of system that man-made, but that enables us, or sort of sustains modern life, digital life, and the sort of complex society that comes along with that. So I'm interested in this notion because it's something that we can rationalize, but we cannot perceive it most of the time. So the sort of major underpinning of this system is radio, a medium that is over 100 years old. This is a picture of the famous Zhukov Tower in Moscow. It was constructed at a time when radio was still a sort of futuristic medium and was celebrated architecturally as well. Today, that is not so much the case, as you can see from these cell phone antennas here that are sort of disguised and blended into our surroundings and not really meant to be seen. And for me, this is an interesting challenge as an artist, to translate this invisible abstraction into something imaginable, something that you can see and experience. This is a project that I did a couple of years ago that tries to visualize the networks around us, with the idea that while we are speaking right now in my space and in your space as well, we are literally surrounded with information. So there's hundreds of signals from cell phones and all kinds of devices that are activating the space around us and filling it with information, going through spaces, going through our bodies. And this project tries to visualize that. So I'm not sure if sound is transmitted right now, but if you use, it's an app that you can use on an iPad or phone that creates a site-specific visualization of your surroundings. So it's not actually measuring signals, but it's using a global data set with millions of cell tower locations, Wi-Fi router locations, satellite positions to draw this image and then translate it into a three-dimensional visualization. So you can pick it up and move it around and, as it were, look into this dimension of our daily lives that is actually all around us, but beyond our senses. So I created this work for an exhibition at ZKM in Karlsruhe in Germany. And it was nice. A few hundred people saw it, picked it up, and I got some nice feedback from it. But it was interesting because afterwards I put it online, I distributed it as an app, and to my surprise, people were using it all across the world. I mean, I could have thought about it, of course, but I didn't imagine that people would actually pick it up and document the way that they were using it. And what's interesting here is that when you pick it up and you use it in a big city, you may see hundreds or thousands of signals. But when you take it out into the country or into remote areas, you might just see like one or two or even no signals at all. And just the fact that people were documenting it was really interesting to me, because it allowed the work to function in a way that I kind of imagined, but was never able to actually go to all these places myself and see how it works. And then a couple of months later, a friend forwarded me this short clip, and I hope there's sound. So I'm not sure if you can hear it, but the idea is that it was picked up by some TV show. I think it was called like CSI Cybercrime or something like that. And they were using it, I mean, completely not the way it actually works, because you cannot use it to find any device because it's using a data set. But I liked the clip anyway, just because it was funny to hear them say this sort of artsy title that I came up with for the project, but also it illustrated to me that they felt this need as well for a TV series that deals with cybercrime, which is something that you normally cannot see, to make this translation. And for me, it signified that this approach of trying to visualize or translate these invisible abstractions of information technology into visual pieces is something that works not just in the realm of a museum, but also beyond that. So after this project, we set out on another project, which was a collaboration with a documentary filmmaker and a photographer, Jacqueline Hassink. And we used this app that I made to look at the density of the networks in our cities, and we realized we are constantly living inside this sort of cloud of information. And we started to wonder where this would end, or if it would end anywhere at all. So I made this map based on the coverage footprints of all the publicly available cell phone providers in the world. So we had a big data set with all the providers like Vodafone and T-Mobile and whatnot. And they all have these footprints that show where they have coverage and where they don't have coverage. So if you zoom in, you see like in the US, there are, of course, many areas that are covered, which are black or dark blue in this image, but also a lot of white areas where there's no coverage. You can also see it here in Japan. And I especially like this image, which is a close-up in Sudan, where you see the sort of circular patterns from where the cell towers are and how they are aligned along the main roads. So if you just stick to these roads, you might think that the country is entirely connected, but if you just go slightly outside of that, you realize that there's actually a lot of white space. And we used this map, which is an interesting map in itself, because I think it shows a stark contrast between the global north and south, of course. But we used it as a guide. We thought of it as a kind of terra incognita, a sort of unknown land. And we called the project White Spots, for the white spots on the map. And for us, it signified this idea that there are places that don't produce data, that when we look at the world through a computer, which is how many of us spend a lot of our time looking at the world, then these are not just white spots, but also blind spots in a way, because they don't produce data. And when we look at the world through data, then these places are sort of overlooked. So we created this project where, like I said, we worked with a documentary filmmaker and a photographer to visit these places and see what life is like for people living in these white spots. And it resulted in an app with about 40 interviews or short what it's like to. And there are some really interesting places there, some of which are white spots because there's no economic case for a company to create service there. But some of them are also deliberate white spots that are created for a certain reason, like for example this digital detox center in China, or there's also places that are geared specifically to tourism or no internet. So it's a wide range. You can still download that app, see for yourself. I'm going to quickly go through this. So these two projects, they talk about data as something that is part of our surroundings, part of daily life, and both are based on data sets. So they're not actually measuring anything, but they show a kind of theoretical reality. But at the same time, I got curious if it was possible to sort of capture this information like directly. So I started doing some experiments with directional antennas and seeing if I could capture like Wi-Fi sources in my studio space and sort of categorize them by color, which resulted in another work where I tried to sort of reenact this idea of a landscape painter, where the landscape would just be electromagnetic signals. So again, here I'm using directional antenna to capture different sources of signals, and then use a pen plotter to draw the landscape at the scene. So I've tried this in a few different locations to see like how this could potentially be a way of capturing landscapes. And this is something that I'm interested in many of my projects, is the idea to sort of reveal this dimension of daily life that is data. And again, in this work, which is a tapestry that visualizes the Wi-Fi signals going through my space, I was looking for something that emphasizes the sort of domestic dynamic. So when I'm in my house, I tend to think of it as a private space, but at the same time, there are like hundreds of signals from, the neighbor printer to smart meters and everything that are just going through my space. And I made this tapestry which uses a thermochromic ink, thermochromic yarn that changes color when heated. And I created an array of heating elements behind the tapestry to heat up parts of the image. And the idea is that you create a visualization of data in your space, but not as a dashboard or something that is readable, but more as a kind of ambience piece, something that is there, that is changing very slowly throughout the day, that you may see like from the corner of your eye, that, as people get home from work, it starts to get busier, or at night it starts to get like more quiet. And the idea is that this is not a display like another piece of technology that shows you this information, but it's more something that blends into the domestic space. So it doesn't emit any light, just reflects light, so it's like a passive object that lives in your domestic space. So I'm not sure how I'm doing with the time, but I think I may go quickly through this one. Again, electromagnetic waves, obviously, they are in the same frequency range as visible light, as infrared, as microwaves. So in a way, it is a form of light, but not one that we can see, obviously. So again, in this work, I try to portray the electromagnetic space as a landscape. In this case, not spatially, so it's not about where the signals come from, but it looks at the frequency space as a landscape. So you're looking at a panoramic projection and a digital receiver that scans the spectrum quickly and visualizes in real time the signals that it picks up between 0 and 1 gigahertz, and it annotates the signals with all the different sort of spectrum divisions that are there. So you can see like, okay, this is a radio broadcast, this is like a medical device, this is airplane communication, and then in the space you can look at the work, but you can also move parallel to the work and zoom in certain frequencies. So it's a bit like an old-fashioned radio dial with the line that moves across the spectrum, but in this case, you are the line. So you can move left and right to select a piece of the spectrum, and then as you move forward, window that opens up becomes wider and wider to reveal a detailed part of the spectrum. And again, the idea here is that this electromagnetic space, it's picked up where you are, so it's using an antenna, and it's something that you can look at as a landscape and just look at the aesthetic qualities of it, like patterns that emerge in different spaces. And once you're a bit sort of accustomed to the work, then you can start reading it a bit more in depth. Now, I'm not sure if anyone could tell me how much time I have left.
Yeah, just for the final sentence, if you don't mind.
No?
The final sentence, if you don't mind.
In that case, I'll do one more.
Okay.
I think 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll be done. So these projects I showed so far, they all talk about man-made electromagnetic signals. In this project, I'm looking at natural electromagnetic signals. To be specific, I'm looking at solar wind, which is emitted from the sun as charged particles that are projected into our solar system and also towards Earth, and that we can see on Earth as polar lights. And I'm interested because these particles, they create what they call space weather, which is the sort of condition that Earth lives in. So it's one day there's more, one day it's less, and these solar winds, they change in direction and intensity. There's this spacecraft, it's called Discover, and it's about, it's not exactly halfway, but it's in between Sun and Earth at an orbit where the gravity of the Sun and the Earth even out, so it just stays there, and it detects these solar winds and sends data about them to Earth through a ground station. Solar winds, they follow a cycle. Every 11 years, there's like a peak. And we are approaching one of these peaks right now. And the interesting thing is that they don't just show us polar lights, but they also are, they can have quite an impact on satellites, on GPS, on radio transmissions that we use on Earth. And with every cycle, we are getting increasingly dependent on these technologies. So the impact that these solar winds are having are likely to become larger and larger. So here you can see a graph from the satellite, and you see like the fluctuations in magnitude and density and speed. And I'm using this data from the ground station to recreate an electromagnetic field, a magnetic field, for a work that I call the cosmic wind chime, which is a kind of reenactment of the sensor data from the satellite. And it translates the information that I get from the ground station into a small magnetic field using an array of electromagnets that set into motion a series of brass tubes. So it functions like a traditional wind chime that you might have in your garden that captures the wind, but in this case it's an indoor work where there's no wind, but it captures the solar wind and recreates that data as an acoustic work.